Welcome back to another episode of the South by East podcast, where we talk about music, scriptures, and everything in between. Brail, where are
Yes.
we at this week?
Yes, sir. So, man, this week's episode was really brought on by two things. Number one of my favorite artists, Lupe Fiasco, he has a song called Chopper, and he had this line that I never quite understood about looking ghosts in the face. And I was like, man, that's poetic. That's cool.
Yeah.
Until I saw this interview where he talked about the neighborhood where he came from, and he saw some of the ghosts in the video, and it had this profound impact on him. And I thought about him leaving his neighborhood in order to do good. And then I heard a story about yours that came out, a piece that was done on your life. And I thought about, man, Johnathan has embedded himself in a similar type of neighborhood and is transforming. And how do you know when to stay and build, and how do you know when to go? So I want to just look at a little bit of that piece, of that Lupe Fiasco interview, and then I just want to hear something about your story.
Okay.
All right, let's check it out.
Play however you want to play. I go to skate park because I don't like the hood. I got more guns than you do. All my homies is killers. All my homies is in every gang you want to talk about. You know, every level of crime you want to talk about. You know, but that ain't what it's about. You know, that ain't what it's supposed to be, because that didn't build this place. It's gonna tear this place down. You know, so for me to see myself 6 years ago surrounded by some people who not here and even here, repping the hood, doing what they do, that never left. You know, it's just it's a sober thing to me. You know, and I'm out here and I could do. And it's sobering because you know your father was right, your mother was right. It was like, yo, you got to get out. Stick to what you know and get out. Because if you stay here, you're going to die. And you're not going to die.
Man, I thought about that. I am from East Topeka. This is my neighborhood. Walked and canvassed the streets of Hi-Crest. Was with the Kansas Democratic Party. Some of my white coworkers dropped me off. We were all supposed to be here together. They dropped me off. It took off to go get lifted for a couple hours while I canvassed the whole neighborhood. They came and picked me up. But that's how people thought of the neighborhood of Hi-Crest. It was a place to escape from. It was a place to drop in on. Yet you have planted roots here. But you came from a place not too dissimilar.
Oh, very. Probably like the Hi-Crest that people remember.
Right. And so, like, man, and you often talk about building a place where people choose to be.
Yeah.
Where people want to be, and building into this area where people don't have to leave.
Yeah.
And so, man, as I heard your story, I was like, man, I just want to ask him some questions, man. Like,
Yeah.
What caused you to choose Topeka instead of going back to South Oak Cliff?
Well, man, here's the deal. Sometimes there's parts of your stories where you get a choice, and then sometimes where you don't get a choice. So, for instance, I tell a story of how there was a couple of not catalytic moments, but catalytic relationships in my life that transformed them. And I can remember. So here's where, man, this is like, you know, we do a lot with schools, and like I get like schools don't have to push hard to get stuff out of me, and it's because of the role they've played in my life. I can still remember my second grade teacher who took me and another student to make homemade pizza at her apartment, and then took us to play putt-putt. And man, I thought that was the greatest experience of my life. And she got permission from my mom, of course, and different things of that nature. But it was just special. She saw something, she wanted to pour in, and I thought, this is what it feels like to be rich. Like I was just like forever. I was like, man, we made pizza at somebody's house. You know, I was like, and then my sixth grade teacher, man, I always tell a story about him taking us to his house to eat dinner, and that was the first time, other than Cosby Show, that I saw a family eat dinner together. That day, I said I was going to be rich, and people say, "What does that mean?" I said, "Man, I'm gonna have a family, and we're going to eat dinner together." And you know how much I treasure dinner. But he's also the one who taught me how to write my first research paper using an Encyclopedia Britannica.
Wow.
He also was my basketball coach. He took me to a game at SMU, and I remember. They had this little dinner for us, and then they let us go. They had tickets to this game, and that night we was on SMU's campus, and he's like, it had one of these moments where he was like, "You're gonna get a scholarship, and you're gonna go to college."
Wow.
And I was like, "Oh,
oh,
okay." And because he had told a story of how he had both academic and athletic scholarships, and how he played college basketball. That became my goal. He was the most successful person I knew at that point. And so that became my goal, to get both academic and athletic scholarships to go to college.
What did that feel like when he said that to you? Was it like, I can't see that, or was it, okay, if you say it, then that's what I'm gonna do?
Bro,
how did that hit you?
I started storybooking my shoe commercial where I was gonna dunk on Shaquille O'Neal.
Let's go. Oh,
because Shaq at that point, Shaq had just made it to the NBA.
Yeah.
He had came out of LSU early, went to Orlando. He had a Reebok sneaker, and he came out with a rap album, all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And like, man, talking about how his dad became his father because his biological didn't bother, like the whole deal, man.
Yeah. Shaq was tough.
He had a couple of good albums.
Shaq was tough.
Shaq had a couple of good albums. Like, you want to sleep on it.
I'd said he dropped something, I think last year. He actually,
I don't know.
He actually dropped something last year.
His first two albums, well, I had them on cassette tape. So I started storybooking my shoe commercial where I was gonna dunk on Shaq in the commercial.
Nice.
He had me believing, man.
Yeah.
He used to pick us up for church. He used to pick us up for church on Sundays and take us to church. And I showed an interest, and I wanted to go to church on Wednesdays, and so he arranged for someone to pick me up. And you don't know this part. So, you know, I pay you to be on campus at the schools every week.
Yeah.
Our schools had trouble getting substitutes and getting teachers. And so he got his pastor to start being our substitute gym teacher.
Wow.
And he got other people from the church to start subbing there.
Wow.
And this being at the school every week. And so,
wow.
And the pastor started like being this good influence on these little hood kids and being there when he didn't have to because he was full time. And so your job description is not unique.
Right.
It's me repeating this thing that was catalytic and changed the direction of my life. And he started getting these people from his church to pour into us, where I started wanting to spend more time at the church.
Wow.
And then he made transportation not a barrier by having people pick me up to put more time at the church.
Wow. When you talk about catalytic relationships, I did a TEDx event in Topeka in 2015. And I talked about the givers. and it was mostly teachers in my life who they just gave selflessly, and it influenced so much of who I am and what I do and where I go, and um, a lot of the choices I made and things that I still do to this day come from specific teachers or school
Yeah.
counselors in my life or in my church where I grew up. One of my Sunday school teacher was also my counselor. It was
Yeah.
also my licensed therapist, my counselor, and man, those impactful
Yeah.
relationships.
It was a set of teachers who were believers who used to just put all this time into us, man. I'm seriously, like, they took us to church. They would let us babysit the kids. They would, I can just on and on
Right.
how they poured into us. And those were those moments. And so here's the deal. I was a sixth grade kid. I was a fifth grade kid. I can go throughout, right? I didn't know everything to do. Only thing I knew how to do was model the behavior of the people I saw as successful in my life. And when it came time for me to be in position, I don't know what I'm doing. The only thing I know how to do is to put the same type of people in place where I live at now that were put in place for me then. To culture the same type of experiences. Like, so when I was in elementary school, I at that time I wanted to be a lawyer and eventually a judge. And so my teachers took me to a trial one day in downtown Dallas. And the judge let me try on their road. And so I've always been big on experiences. And when somebody shares a dream, trying to get them to experience it, just a taste of it, so that it becomes real to them, that it's not out of reach. The same goes for owning a home. Like, both of my parents died, never owning a home. My mom, oh man, I can tell you, just it was like a never-ending thing of her talking about this dream of owning a house, and never did it. My dad, I mean, he worked. I mean, he wasn't perfect, but man, he worked at a steel plant, worked, did nighttime janitorial work as a second job to make extra money on top of his still working job. And he had this dream of buying a house, and he had a picture of the house he wanted on his bedroom wall. And he saved enough money, he bought this piece of land, but he could never just get over the hump to actually put a house on the land. He died never realizing the dream. And so this work that I do is personal. When I went to 6 different elementary schools and 2 different middle schools. They say that a kid loses 6 months of learning every time they transition schools. So you add that up. And one of the things that families struggle with is what they call like the support cliff. So that when they start making progress in their life, often they have to leave the place where they're at. And then what happens is they have to leave their whole support network, these relationships and everything they built to get them to help take a step.
Right.
And the same thing for kids. When you bond with that teacher and then you change schools. You bond with those friends and then you change schools. You finally figure stuff out and then you change schools. You're starting over all the time. And so here, what I've been building and never have really publicly laid out the whole vision is I've been trying to build a neighborhood where someone could take their next step from being unsheltered all the way to owning a home and never have to leave the support network that they had. And so that looks different, right? And we have to start where we could start at. Because sometimes you get choices and sometimes you don't. The place where we started with building that first home, where we did and how we did, is where we had to start. And then we've built more infill houses. We've built some rentals. We've built some that are subsidized and income restrained, and now we're about to get to build some that the person kind of like in that next step where they wouldn't qualify for this program. Now the school teachers and that kind of deal can go in, all those stories intertwining. Right. We're about to build the dignified apartment complex. Mm-hmm. My hope is still to build and get the city of Topeka to relax some of its rules on building and to get the support to build pallet homes and tiny homes. And now a person will be able, because we do all our work with our unsheltered, right? Through the warming centers and everything else. Yeah. Well, we'll be able to take somebody who's unsheltered and help them get into one of our pallet homes. And take someone in the pallet home and help them get into a tiny home. And take somebody who's in a tiny home and help them get into the low-income apartment complex. And take somebody in the low-income apartment complex and help them get into one of the rentals in the neighborhood, and take someone who's in one of the rentals and help them buy that first rehab home. And take somebody who's in that first rehab home and have them sell the rehab home and get into one of the new build homes that's not income restricted in the neighborhood. And they would all be in the same neighborhood, and their kids would never have to move schools or school feeder systems in the whole time. In the whole time, they would always be within walking distance of the resource hub that we built here at Avondale East.
Yeah, it's incredible. So I've got one last question as we get ready to wrap up. Say that someone is facing a choice and they see the great things happening in their community and they're trying to decide, do I need to leave to go build something? Because you're a transplant here, and I use that word intentionally because I do believe that you were planted here for some of the things that God is growing in this space, right? I'm indigenous, not necessarily to this neighborhood, but to this city, right? And so we're working together to do some incredible things that God has given you some incredible vision that I am happy to follow. So how does someone decide, in your opinion, when they're looking and it's like, all right, does God want me to plant here and change the things I see or create the opportunities? Or do I need to go somewhere else to build opportunities for others? How would somebody go about that if they were looking at that choice?
Man, here's what we run into a lot. Most parents want their kids to grow up and do more and achieve more than them.
Right.
Like, you just want greater for your kids and stuff.
Yeah.
And that's great. So a lot of times we want to launch our kids out. We want to shoot them out, right?
Exactly.
Arrow, launch them out. And that's great. But what we need some of our kids to be boomerang arrows. We need, I say every healthy neighborhood, and this is my made up deal, I say every healthy neighborhood needs about a 20% return.
Explain that.
You need about 20% of any generation to be inspired and passionate about returning to reinvest in the neighborhood that nurtured and grew them, so that they're able to be there for the next generation. You take that 20% return and you match it with another 20% transplant. Because you always need fresh ideas.
Yep, you do.
You always need fresh and innovative ideas to come into any situation to help it remain vibrant. You need that return to help form the chain to the past, so that you don't forget all your history and your institutional knowledge.
Right.
You need that, right? And then you need them to work together, right, with the other transient 60% to produce the result what you need in your neighborhood. Because you want your neighborhood, you want the 60% to be transient. Here's why. Because you want to be a sending neighborhood. You want all those that come in contact with that 40%, with the 20% boomerangs, with the 20% transient or transplants, and you want them to influence the other 60 so that when they go on, they have stories of saying, Brail, what you do on a weekly basis wasn't this unique ideal that I had.
Yeah.
it was something I experienced in this
Yeah.
place where I grew up at.
Thank you, South Oak Cliff. Thank you for this gift, for this transplant. And I want to know about y'all who meet us here in the intersection. What are your catalytic experiences and what are your catalytic relationships? Let's talk about it in the comment section and whether you are being prepared to launch or whether you've been transplanted. We want to hear about the things that are growing in that space where you have been planted. Hey, continue to comment, like, subscribe. Let's break off into some conversations, and we'll see you here next week in the intersection.